What's up, Barnhill family? Welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
Guys, as you can see, Nick and I are remotely doing our video today. Nick actually came down with a case of COVID. Nick, how you feeling?
Well, it got me. I was able to get away from it for many, many months and actually over a year and a half, but it did finally catch me, the COVID virus. Luckily, I don't feel that bad. I've got a little bit of aching and mostly in my back, and I don't have quite as much energy as I like to have. But other than that, I'm doing okay. Just gonna keep myself quarantined away from everybody and try to get through this as quickly as possible so we can get back to the studio, of course, and get back to training as quickly as possible.
I missed the studio. It seems like we haven't been there in forever. We were on the road, and now we're working remotely.
Yeah, remote locations for a few weeks now. I mean, the one when we were traveling to Georgia, that made sense, but now we're back here in Texas, and we're still doing the remote thing. But we still have some great fights to talk about. So whether we're in the studio, the main room, or not, we still have to get these videos out.
That's right. And better late than never, guys. We apologize. We told you that the recap of Sean Strickland, Uriah Hall was forthcoming, and here it is. So let's just jump right into it, Nick. I was very impressed with Sean Strickland's performance. I mean, we saw almost 200 significant strikes landed, 4 takedowns out of 6 attempts. So almost every takedown he attempted, he got. He dominated Uriah from start to finish, and I was quite impressed with his performance.
Yeah, I mean, talk about seizing a moment. He's a main event fighter that just went and showed everybody that he can go 25 hard minutes, win every single round against a guy who a lot of people, not just me, but a lot of people in the sport thought was going to eventually reach a UFC title. Uriah Hall is an absolute killer. Has been doing pretty good lately, but he's one of those guys who'll take 2 or 3 steps forward and then a step back. And unfortunately, Saturday against Strickland, he took a little bit of a step back.
Yeah, and for me, the biggest takeaway for Hall, and we can get into Strickland's performance in a second, but just to touch on Uriah, it seemed is like he has this recurring problem, rather, of the inability to know when and how to pull the trigger. He's very skilled. He's very explosive. His Muay Thai is actually quite devastating when applied, but he seems to, of late at least, have an issue with throwing a lot of volume and, putting forth the type of pressure and volume in his punches and kicks and forward movement to really win rounds and win fights.
Yeah.
He seems, and I don't think it's a cardio issue, because if you saw in the 5th round, he came out of the gate trying to knock Strickland out. And for a couple minutes there, he was throwing some good volume and landed some good shots. And it was a bit of a firefight, and him and Strickland were both landing. So it tells me that he had the gas in the tank at the end of the fight. I think this is something other than a cardio issue. I think at 37 years old, maybe he's just running out of steam in this game, unfortunately.
Yeah, and one thing I really always hate seeing, and it happens more often than I'd like, is when a guy that is an explosive, exciting fighter holds back and is gun shy until the last 5 minutes, and then they turn it up a bit, but it's too little, too late, and the opponent has done plenty work and then some to get his hand raised, and all he has to do is survive this onslaught from a tired fighter who's already been getting beaten up for 20 minutes or so. You see it actually a lot in boxing, really any combat sports. You see, actually, I'll even move it into football. You'll see it in a game of football where a team or a fighter or somebody like that will go really hard for the last 30 seconds. And it's like, guys, I think you would be undefeated fighters or undefeated teams in whatever sport you're in if you played with the intensity of the last minute that you played for the duration of the fight or the duration of the game. So I kind of hate when people hear the clap of the last 10 seconds of the round and then they throw it all out there. It always makes me feel like they're not leaving everything they can in the octagon. And this is a sport where you absolutely have to leave everything you've got, everything you bring into this training camp and everything in the octagon and put on the best possible show for the fans. And unfortunately, I don't think Uriah Hall did that. I think Sean Strickland certainly did. And he's a main event fighter, a main event winner that is going to keep climbing up the totem pole. And I'm really excited to see what he does next.
Yeah, he looked very well-rounded, and I had some concern going into the fight because we had talked about all the wars that he said he's having in the gym with Khamzat Chimaev and with Orlando Sanchez, the ADCC Jiu-Jitsu champion. I thought maybe he'd go into the fight a little sluggish, a little tired, possibly a little injured, but he looked great to me. The volume was outstanding. The cardio was outstanding. One really interesting note that I took away from the fight was he kind of is very comfortable boxing in a Philly shell sort of stance. And for those of you that don't really know what that means or what a Philly shell is, it's kind of, if you watch Floyd Mayweather box, that's the stance that he uses. It's common in boxing by fighters that are really high-level strikers that can read shots coming. It's very uncommon to see in MMA. It's even less common to see it work in MMA. You know, an old boxing coach that we had in Savannah used to call it the Philly cheesesteak because the guys who came out in the Philly shell, their foreheads looked like Philly cheesesteak by the time it was over with because they weren't able to effectively defend themselves. But Sean showed a comfortability in his striking that I was quite impressed with. And now we know kind of that Dana White's leaning towards Luke Rockhold being his next opponent, who we know is a prolific striker as well. Also got great cardio, also got great takedowns and submissions. And I think Luke Rockhold wasn't charged up about that fight before last Saturday's performance against Hall, but you got to think Luke Rockhold at least can put some respect on Sean Strickland's name now and be excited to have him as a next opponent.
Yeah, and this sport is all about what have you done for us lately. Sean Strickland's doing a whole hell of a lot these days, and he's winning main event fights. And Luke Rockhold, no offense, he's a legend, former champion. You always got to show him respect, but he hasn't been doing a whole lot for the UFC community or the MMA industry ever since. And what he has been doing, he's not getting his hand raised. He's coming in second in these fights, so. I would not be so quick to judge Sean Strickland as a nobody or say that he's not in your league or in your realm. I would be clinging on to him if I was Luke Rockhold. I mean, if you think it's a favorable matchup, if you think it's somebody you could go dismantle and it would be a good return fight for you in 185, then get out there and do it. Prove us wrong and take that main event shine that Sean Strickland is clearly getting. I mean, in my opinion, the raw, real, natural guys that don't try to be somebody that they're not. They don't try to imitate other fighters that are, entertainers and have done big things in the sport, like Conor McGregor, like Chael Sonnen, and those types of guys. But they're just authentically themselves. They tend to do really well. The UFC loves to put some time and investment behind them. Sean Strickland is exactly that. He comes from a very, very difficult past and checkered past, and a lot of people that came from his, upbringing and where he was would not be fighting in main events and winning them in the UFC. So he should be very proud of himself. And I think that the UFC has a real star or potential star on their hands if they can keep him winning, keep him in the main event slots, and keep putting the microphone in his face so he can keep making people out there that feel just like him or are very similar to him. They can feel more welcome and more invited into the sport.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think, listen, Luke Rockhold is a star and Sean Strickland is an emerging star. Luke Rockhold also, that he, as you said, he hasn't fought in a while and he's not getting his hand raised when he does. I get that his last opponent was Jan Blachowicz at 205 and he got knocked out in that fight. That was summer 2019. You don't come off a knockout loss 2 years ago and step into a title fight. Which seems to be kind of what Luke wants with Israel Adesanya. And Adesanya, we know he's looking for big names. And obviously, Rockhold versus Adesanya would be a fight that a lot of people would be excited about, myself included. But Rockhold's got to come back and get a win. And if he feels like Sean Strickland's a favorable matchup, Sean's got a lot of steam behind him now. And the best thing you can do when you haven't been active, if you want to get, just as we saw with TJ Dillashaw against Corey Sandhagen, you come back in and take the wind out of somebody else's sails and you move yourself right back into the mix, because I truly believe that with a spectacular finish of Sean Strickland, if Rockhold was able to get that, we're talking about Rockhold Adesanya almost instantaneously after that happens.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Luke Rockhold, even though he hasn't been that active and hasn't been that victorious recently, he still is a guy that is a bit of a draw, and we love him or hate him. You're going to watch him fight. I think that you put him – he's probably not far off from a main or co-main slot no matter where he fights. But Sean Strickland, you don't go down in this sport by losing main event fights. So I see Sean Strickland's next fight being a main event for a fight night, or the fight just before the title fights on a pay-per-view, and probably be a big one. The UFC is always doing big pay-per-views these days. So I think if Luke Rockhold can attach himself to that, we've got ourselves a seriously good fight, a great main event. And I'm really excited to see it because if Sean Strickland can beat Luke Rockhold, I think we've got a new guy that we really need to pay attention to at 185 as being one of the guys that gets a crack at Izzy, because Izzy's already run through a lot of the guys. And while he's not afraid to go through them again, it's nice to see different styles and different personalities in the octagon to bring the best out of the champ and bring the best out of the opponents as well. So I'd really like to see it.
Absolutely. The thing that all of these guys, Strickland and Rockhold included, have going for them at 185 is that there's kind of a need for big names to emerge. And then on top of that, you had the people who are already big names and great fighters have already been defeated by Adesanya for the most part. There's still a few of them out there. You have Darren Till hanging around, but a strong win by somebody at 185 against somebody like a Luke Rockhold, or even if Luke Rockhold gets over on Strickland in glorious fashion, you're not dealing with a lot of depth at the top. This is not 155. So at 185, I think things are a bit open. And even after 2 years and being knocked out in his last fight, a solid win against an up-and-comer like Strickland could put Rockhold right back in the mix. And just as I said that, I'll also say that a strong win for Strickland over Luke Rockhold, who's a huge name, will put him right in the mix. So I'm excited to see how it plays out. Looks like that's the fight we're going to get. And I think it's going to be a really tough fight. Both of these guys are game. They're great strikers. They got good cardio. They got good takedowns. They're just all around good MMA fighters.
Yeah, everybody knows Luke Rockhold's a tough night out. And he was saying for the longest time that nobody wants to fight him. He can't get a fight. Nobody's willing to sign the dotted line when it comes to fighting me. Well, I hope he doesn't take a page out of all the fighters that said no to him and start ducking fighters and ducking Sean Strickland, saying he doesn't want to fight him because he was just complaining about that on the other end. So I hope we see that fight. I do think it is going to happen. I think it's going to happen hopefully before the end of this year. And we'll get to see which one of these stars emerges as a top contender.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Again, we're sorry it took so long to get out. We were traveling, and then Nick, with his COVID diagnosis, took a couple of days to get his voice back, but we figured better late than never. So if you've enjoyed this video, if you're new here, like, comment, and subscribe is much appreciated. We love engaging with you guys in the comments. And if you listen to audio podcasts, check us out where you listen to those as well. And guys, until the next one, have a wonderful day.
Peace.